The morning my son unlocked my door and found nothing but silence was the first time I ever heard real fear in his voice. I was not there to see it. Of course. But I know Declan Grant well enough to imagine the exact moment the lock clicked, the hinges creaked, and he stepped into the basement apartment he had always assumed I would never leave. He probably expected to find me folding laundry or fussing over breakfast. Instead, he walked into a space stripped clean of my existence. "Mom," he snapped, sharp and impatient, as if summoning an employee. Nothing answered him back. I left only one thing behind a single folded note on the counter. I can picture his hand hovering over it, unsure whether to touch it. Declan does not like surprises, and he especially does not like surprises he cannot control. From the floor above, Sabine's voice sliced through the silence. Did she go out again? Nova spilled cereal everywhere, and Callum is screaming. I need help down here. A child wailed in the background, high, frantic, exhausted. A chair scraped. Something fell. Then Sabine again, sharper this time. Declan. Why is it so quiet down there? Did she leave another mess? What is taking you so long? He did not answer her. Maybe he was staring at the empty coat hooks, the bare bookshelf, the missing knitting basket. Maybe he was realizing that the chair I always kept near the window was gone. And the lamp he once knocked over during one of his childhood tantrums was no longer in the corner. Maybe he was noticing that I had taken every small thing that belonged to me and left nothing behind but the things that belonged to them. Footsteps thundered on the stairs. Declan, I swear. If she went out without telling us, Sabine stopped short when she saw the room. I imagine her standing there, frozen, makeup smudged from the long night with 2 restless children, taking in the sight she never expected. Where is she? She whispered. Declan finally unfolded the note. His hands must have shaken. He hates when anything slips outside his grasp, and for the first time, everything had slipped. He read my handwriting slowly, I think, because Declan only slows down when something inside him stumbles. Upstairs. Nova started crying again. Sabine tried to soothe her, but her voice wavered. Declan, what does it say? Is she coming back? Why would she leave without? He did not answer her either, because the truth was simple and cruel and earned. I was gone. And for the first time since he became a father, a husband, and the landlord of my tiny basement apartment, Declan had to stand between 2 crying children and the consequences of his own choices. But this moment, the panic, the chaos, the unraveling was not where my story began. It started 3 weeks earlier, at a table where my son and his wife believed they could decide the shape of my life. And they believed I would just sit there and let them. I arrived at Declan's house carrying a tin of lemon cookies, the kind he used to beg for when he was 10. Sabine opened the door before I could knock twice. Her smile was polite, stiff, almost rehearsed. You made it just in time, she said. Stepping aside, we were waiting for you. I stepped into the kitchen and immediately sensed it something taut in the air, stretched thin between them. Declan sat at the table with his shoulders squared, elbows planted. He looked like a man preparing for a negotiation instead of a meal with his mother. Hi. Mom, he said, voice too measured. Sit down. We need to talk before the kids get back from their play date. I set the cookies down slowly. What's going on? Sabine slid into the seat beside him, legs crossed, fingers interlaced on the table. It's nothing dramatic, just a conversation about the future. Declan nodded. A rent review. My spine tightened. Rent review. You know the housing market, he said, lifting his chin. Prices in Portland aren't what they were. We've been covering a lot of costs to keep your basement unit so affordable. I had lived in that basement for 6 years. I replaced my own filters, fixed my own leaks. and covered every tiny expense I could so I would never burden him. Still, I kept my tone calm. What exactly are you thinking? Sabine leaned forward with a practiced softness. We love having you close. Truly. And we know you value your independence. So we came up with something fair for everyone. Declan slid a folder across the table. Inside was a printed schedule, neat rows, highlighted blocks, pickup times, homework hours. I blinked. What is this, a proposal? He said. You help with Nova and Callum. Every weekday evening. 2 weekends a month, just until things settle. Sabine added. Nova needs stability after school. Callum gets so restless before bedtime. You're the only one they trust. The words were dipped in honey. But the intent was iron. And if I say no, I asked. Declan didn't flinch. Then we will have to adjust your rent to reflect market rate. There it was. Clean, blunt, final. I opened the folder again, scanning the lines. Pickups at 3:15 and 3:30, homework until 5, dinner prep until 7, 2 full weekends each month. My voice came out steady. You want me to be your nanny? Sabine's smile sharpened. Family helps family. Besides, you are already here. It is convenient. I work. I said, you work part-time. She corrected gently, but with a sting beneath it. You have more free hours than we do. Declan folded his hands. This is a reasonable solution. You get to keep the same rent. The kids get consistency. We get peace of mind. I took a breath that didn't fill my lungs. You are giving me an ultimatum. It is not an ultimatum, he replied. It is a choice. Sabine smirked, crossing her arms. The obvious choice. My chest tightened, not from shock, but from the quiet realization that they had practiced this conversation, that they believed it was logical, good, even generous. I see, I said softly. Sabine tapped the printed schedule. Just sign the bottom. We can start Monday. I stood. My chair scraped louder than I intended, but neither of them flinched. Mom, Declan said sharply, we need an answer. You will have one. I said, my voice steady even as something deep inside me shifted. Soon. I picked up my coat, walked toward the door, and felt their eyes on my back, confident, expectant, already convinced I would bend the way I always had, but I was not bending this time. Not again. I walked home from Declan's house with the printed schedule still burning in my purse. The evening air felt heavier than it should have, as if the weight of 40 years had settled across my shoulders all at once. I kept my steps steady, but inside, old memories rose like ghosts I had spent years trying to quiet. When Declan was small, he used to wrap his arms around my neck and whisper, "It's just you and me, Mom." He said it with pride back then. I said it with determination. His father died before Declan turned 3, leaving me with bills, the mortgage on our tiny bungalow, and a toddler who clung to me like I was the whole world. I worked days at a laundromat, nights cleaning offices, weekends doing bookkeeping for a bait shop on Commercial Street. Declan never knew how close we came to losing everything. How I once found only $9 in my account and still managed to buy his birthday cake. I gave up vacations, dinners out, new clothes, and whole months of sleep, all so he could stand where he stands now, confident, educated, and steady. "Mom, you always manage," he used to say. "You're the capable one." He meant it as a compliment. I accepted it like a badge. Somewhere along the way, it became a leash. I reached my small basement apartment and locked the door behind me. The familiar click should have soothed me, but it didn't. I sat at the kitchen table, the schedule spread out in front of me. The neat time blocks stared back as if they were already carved into my life. 3:15, 3:30, 5 o'clock, 7 o'clock, 2 weekends a month. My breath came out thin. "I work," I whispered to the empty room. "I have a life too." The silence didn't argue. But it didn't comfort me either. My phone buzzed. A message from Declan lit the screen. "We need that answer soon, Mom. The kids are counting on you, and so are we." I read it 3 times. Not once did he ask how I felt. Not once did he ask if I was okay. He simply reminded me of the role he had already assigned me. A resource, a solution, a live-in childminder disguised as family. I pressed my fingers against my temples, trying to hold myself steady. Portland had changed so much over the past decade, rents rising, wages barely keeping up. Seniors pushed to the outskirts or into cramped rooms in family houses. I had thought living under Declan's roof, even in the basement, would give me stability. Instead, it had become leverage, a tool he felt entitled to use. A knock sounded on my door, 3 gentle taps. I opened it to find Inez, my neighbor, holding a small plate of blueberry muffins. "You look like you're thinking too hard," she said, pushing the plate into my hands. "That boy of yours said something foolish again, didn't he?" I sat with her at my table and told her every word. She listened without interrupting, her eyebrows inching higher with each detail. When I finished, she exhaled sharply. "Marlo, he didn't ask you. He told you. There's a difference." I nodded, staring at the muffins but not tasting a thing. "I keep thinking he doesn't mean to hurt me." "Maybe not," she said, "but he's doing it anyway." A pause hung between us, thick and unspoken. She reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "You are 72. You do not belong to anyone." The words struck something deep inside me, something I had kept quiet for far too long. The schedule on the table suddenly looked less like a plan and more like a cage I had built myself. Inez stood, pressing a kiss to my cheek. "Do not let them decide your worth." After she left, I sat alone in the dim light, the paper still in front of me. My hands trembled, but not from fear. Something inside me was shifting, cracking, making space for something new. It was the first time in years I realized that being the capable one had come with a price I could no longer afford to pay. I did not cry when I left Declan's house. I walked down their driveway with the same steady steps I used the day I buried his father slow, controlled, refusing to let the ground swallow me. Something inside me had stiffened, hardening into a resolve I had not felt since I was a young mother fighting to keep a roof over our heads. By the time I reached my tiny basement apartment, my hands were cold and my breath was thin. I set my purse down, pulled out the printed schedule, and spread it across the table like evidence in a case no one asked me to argue. 3:15 pickups, 2 weekends a month, evenings until 7, all written as if my life were an administrative task to be sorted. My eyes drifted to the drawer where I kept my lease. I had not looked at it in years. I unfolded the pages slowly, the paper soft from age. I read every line twice, then a third time just to be sure. That was when the twist revealed itself. The lease clearly said rent could not be raised without 90 days. Written notice increases could not exceed 10% in a year. Termination required mutual agreement or legal cause, 10%. Not market rate, not whatever they wanted, and nothing could happen without 90 days. I pressed my hand over my mouth, not to hide fear, but to hold back a bitter laugh. Declan had no legal ground, not 1 inch of it. My phone buzzed on the table. A text from him. "We need your decision by tomorrow. Do the right thing." I did not respond. A second message from Sabine followed. "We're trying to help you stay useful. Do not make this difficult." Useful. The word stung more than the threat. A knock sounded 2 firm taps. I opened the door to find Inez standing there in her long wool cardigan, hair pulled back, eyes sharp as ever. "You looked upset earlier," she said, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. "So I brought tea." and my mouth both work wonders. I sat across from her and slid the lease over, read that line. She lifted her glasses. Well, would you look at that? Your boy does not know the law half as well as he thinks. I guess he expected me to panic, I murmured. Because you always do what keeps the peace, she said gently. But peace is not peace if the price is your dignity. Her voice cracked something in me that had been sealed for decades. I rubbed my hands together, feeling the tremor of a truth I had tried to avoid. Inez, I think I'm done letting them decide what I owe. Her smile widened. Relieved. Proud. Good. Then start thinking about what you want, not what they want. She stood and squeezed my shoulder before leaving. It is never too late to take your life back, Marlo, after the door closed. I stared down at the lease again. The paper trembled this time from something fierce rising inside me. Their threat had no power, no teeth, no hold, and for the first time in years, I felt something close to possibility. I woke before the sun the next morning, the kind of waking that comes when your mind is already sitting upright even if your body is not. For the first time in a long while, I did not reach for routine. I sat at the edge of my bed and let the quiet pulse around me. I opened my laptop. My fingers hovered above the keys for a long second before I finally typed senior housing near Portland, Maine. Listings scrolled down the screen, most too far, too expensive, too cramped. I almost closed the laptop, thinking I was foolish to dream at my age. Then I saw it. Rose Harbor Cottages, newly renovated units for independent seniors. A small photograph showed a one-story unit with pale siding, a small front porch, and windows wide enough to let in the kind of morning light I had not seen in years. It looked simple, gentle, possible. I clicked before doubt could interfere. A number appeared, and I dialed it with a shaking thumb. A woman picked up on the second ring. Rose Harbor Cottages. This is Mrs. Davenport speaking. Her voice was warm, textured with age and kindness. I swallowed. My name is Marlo Grant. I'm calling to ask if you have any openings. We do, she said. One cottage left. Actually, are you looking to move soon? I hesitated. Sooner than I planned. Well, she replied, life rarely checks our calendars. Would you like to come see it? I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. Yes, today, if possible. Of course. I will be here until 4 o'clock. Just ask for me when you arrive. When I hung up, my chest felt tight, not with fear, but with a strange, trembling hope. I grabbed my coat and left quietly, making sure no one saw me slip out. The drive across town took 15 minutes. I told myself not to imagine anything, not to build dreams around a picture that might not match reality. But when Mrs. Davenport opened the cottage door and smiled, everything inside me softened. There you are, she said. Come in, dear. I stepped inside. The space was small, but open, with warm wooden floors and a layout that felt easy on aging joints. She walked me through each room, pointing out safety railings, adjustable counters, and wide doorways. I tried not to let my voice quiver. It's lovely. It's yours if you want it, she said, handing me a simple application. Your background looks clean, your income is steady, and at your age, stability matters more than anything. I blinked. You already checked. You sounded like someone who needed a door to open, she said gently. So I opened one. I pressed a hand to my chest. Thank you. She touched my arm with a softness that reminded me of my own mother. Everyone deserves a place where they can breathe. I filled out the application while she made tea. By the time she returned, she had that same warm smile. You're approved. Marlo, she said. Welcome home. The words landed with a weight that nearly sent me to my knees. Home. A place that was mine. Not borrowed. Not threatened. I signed the papers before fear could find me again. When I left Rose Harbor Cottages, I did not tell a soul, not Inez, not Arthur, and certainly not Declan. The secret needed to stay whole until I could hold it safely. The smallest door had opened, and I was already stepping through it. I started packing late in the afternoon, when the neighborhood was quiet, and the light through the single basement window had softened to a pale gray. The first box sat open on the floor, waiting, patient and empty. I lowered myself beside it and began folding blankets. Sweaters. The small comforts I had gathered over the years. I moved slowly, not because my body protested, though it did, but because each item carried its own memory. Every fold felt like lifting a stone I had kept in my chest. A soft knock interrupted me. I opened the door to find Arthur Hale standing there, hands in his jacket pockets. Expression gentle. He lived 2 buildings down and had a way of showing up exactly when someone needed him. "You look like you could use an extra set of hands," he said. I stepped aside. "I didn't call you. You didn't have to." He picked up the nearest box and began assembling it with practiced ease. He did not ask why I was packing. He did not ask where I was going. That was the thing about Arthur. He never forced the truth out before it was ready. I wrapped dishes in paper. He taped boxes shut. The silence between us was soft, not awkward. The only sound was cardboard shifting and the occasional sigh from my tired knees. At one point, while sorting a drawer, my fingers brushed something familiar. I pulled it out carefully, a worn-out baseball glove. The leather cracked at the seams. Declan was 9 when he used it. He used to run across the backyard shouting, "Mom, watch this one," and toss the ball too high for his small hands to catch. I kept that glove because the memory of him racing toward me afterward, grinning, breathless, proud, felt like the only time the world made sense. I stared at the glove for a long moment. Arthur noticed that I nodded, my throat tightening. He loved this thing. "You going to keep it?" "I don't know." The words slipped out before I could catch them. "I'm not sure what I'm supposed to carry with me anymore." He leaned against the counter. "Take the things that remind you who you are. Leave the things that remind you who they expect you to be." I set the glove gently in a box. Hours passed without either of us mentioning my son. Eventually, Arthur said, "You need a ride the day you leave, no? I'm arranging movers at sunrise." He nodded slowly. "You want me to act surprised when your boy notices you're gone?" "He won't ask you," I said. "He'll assume he knows everything already." Arthur gave me a sad smile. Then disappearing might teach him something he never bothered to learn. I sealed the last box and exhaled. "I'm not leaving a forwarding address." "Good," he said. "You deserve peace without interruptions." When he left, I locked the door and leaned against it. Every box stacked along the wall felt like a small declaration, a quiet rebellion. By the time the sun set, my apartment no longer looked like a home. It looked like a decision, and once it was made, I did not look back. The movers arrived just before dawn, their truck rumbling softly outside the basement door. I greeted them with a whisper, as if sound alone might alert the house above me. 2 men in navy jackets nodded politely and began carrying boxes out one by one. They did not ask questions. I paid extra for that silence. "Ma'am, just point us where you need things," one of them said. "Everything goes," I replied. "Nothing stays behind." The words surprised me, but they felt solid in my mouth, unchangeable. They worked quickly. In less than an hour, the small apartment that had once held the scraps of my life looked hollow. Bare shelves, empty corners, a lone dust ring where my lamp had lived for years. I ran a cloth over the counters, straightened the sink, and took one last look at the room that had been both refuge and cage. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the keys, 2 small metal pieces that had once meant safety. I placed them on the counter beside the folded schedule Declan had handed me days earlier. I left the schedule not as a message, but as a reminder of the moment he forgot I was a human being. "Ma'am," one of the movers called from the steps. "We're all set whenever you are." I nodded and walked out without closing the door fully, letting the morning air slip inside as if to erase the last trace of me. Outside, the sky was still dark, a thin strip of gray pushing up behind the roofs. Portland's harbor fog drifted through the streets, swallowing the edges of parked cars and street lamps. The movers secured the back of the truck, and I climbed into my car. As I started the engine, a long breath left my chest. Not relief, not fear, something quieter, like the moment before a wave breaks. Arthur stepped out from his porch 2 houses down, pulling his jacket tighter. He approached my car window. "You sure you don't want me to follow behind?" he asked. "No," I said. "This part I need to do alone." He nodded once, firm and understanding. "Take care of yourself." "Marlo." "I will." He stepped back, and I pulled away from the curb. My tires rolled over the damp pavement, the truck following behind me. When I reached the end of the street, I slowed for a moment. The fog wrapped around the houses, softening the world I was leaving. I whispered only one thing to no one, to nothing. Maybe to the woman I used to be. "I'm done." Then I turned the corner and let the fog swallow the last glimpse of my old street. My hands tightened on the wheel. Not from doubt, but from something that felt like reclaiming my own pulse. By the time the sun finally began to rise, I was already miles away, driving toward a place where no one knew my name, no one held power over me, and no one could demand that I give more than I had left. The road ahead was mine, and the life behind me was over before they even realized I had gone. I had barely finished directing the movers at Rose Harbor when my phone began vibrating inside my purse. At first, I ignored it. I wanted the sound of new keys in my hand, of my own steps on clean floors to take up all the space in my head, but the buzzing didn't stop. When I finally checked, the screen glared back at me with a string of missed calls, 5 from Declan, then 8, then 13, and by the time I plugged my phone into the charger, the number had climbed to 23. The first voicemail came through immediately. "Mom, what the hell is going on? I'm at your place. Call me right now." The second was sharper. "Why are your things gone? We need to talk. You cannot just disappear." By the fourth, his voice had cracked. "This is ridiculous. You are scaring the kids. Sabine is furious. Answer your phone." I held the device away from my ear. The tone I knew so well, that clipped, impatient edge he used whenever the world didn't bend the way he expected, struck something in me that had long gone numb. Another voicemail loaded. "Mom, stop acting childish. If you needed time, you could have said so. This stunt is not helping anyone." A stunt. That was what he thought of me leaving behind 72 years of compromise. Then Sabine's message came through. Syrupy and brittle. "Marlo, honey, we are very concerned. You know you cannot just run off without telling us. Declan is overwhelmed and the kids are confused. Please don't make this harder on everyone." I almost laughed. The guilt slid so smoothly it nearly lodged in my ribs. A text from her followed. "We opened our home to you. We gave you a place to belong, and you repay us by vanishing. Please call. Families work things out. Belong." As if a basement and a set of chores were a gift wrapped in ribbon, I pressed my thumb to the block button. My pulse steadied the moment their names disappeared from my home screen. A knock startled me. I opened the cottage door to find Inez standing there with a pastry box stacked high in her arms, her hair pinned up haphazardly, like she'd rushed over without thinking twice. "I figured you might not have had breakfast," she said. "Or lunch. Or sense enough to celebrate by yourself." I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. "How did you know where I moved Arthur?" she said. Stepping inside, he called and said, "She's safe. She's brave. Bring muffins." I felt heat rise behind my eyes. "I didn't want either of you dragged into this." "Dragged," she scoffed. "Honey, we leapt. Now sit. You look like you're about to float away." I sat at the small kitchen table while she unpacked pastries, warm croissants, blueberry turnovers. The smell filled the little cottage like comfort, stretching into every corner. "So," she said, pouring tea with the authority of a woman who had seen too much life to be impressed by anyone's tantrums. "How many calls so far?" 23. She whistled. "That boy is panicking. He's angry." I corrected. "Same thing," she replied. "Men like Declan only panic when they lose control." I stared at my untouched pastry. "He thinks I betrayed him." "No," she said firmly. "He thinks you stopped being useful." The truth of it hit hard. I rubbed my palms together, grounding myself. Inez reached across the table. "Look at me. You did right. And you are not going back to the woman who said yes to everything." I nodded, the air around me thick but steady. The phone buzzed again in my purse. One last time before dying completely. I didn't look. I didn't need to. Declan and Sabine had spent years relying on the version of me who never pushed back, never questioned, never walked away. But that woman was gone, and the chaos they were about to face no longer had anything to do with me. The first sign came the very next morning, long before I even finished unpacking my dishes. I was sitting at my small kitchen table when my phone buzzed, not with a call, but with a message from Inez. "You need to hear this. Mrs. Pembroke just called me." Before I could reply, she sent another. "Your son hired a nanny. She quit after 1 day." I exhaled, slow and steady. Inez arrived 10 minutes later, breathless from walking fast. She said the kids were fine. Inez explained, dropping into a chair without waiting for permission. But Sabine barked orders like she was running a military base. And Declan kept saying things like, "My mother used to handle this without complaining." My jaw tightened. "Of course he did." Inez nodded grimly. "The nanny told them she needed to be paid promptly," Sabine said. "We don't do hourly rates." The woman grabbed her bag and walked out. I closed my eyes. "They thought they could replace free labor with cheap labor." "Exactly," Inez said. "And apparently, they can afford neither." By noon, another message lit up my phone, this time from Arthur. "Heard from a friend at the elementary school. The office called your son twice. No pickup for Nova." I rubbed my temples. Declan had once bragged he never missed a pickup when I lived 10 feet below them. Now he could barely keep track of his own daughter. Later that afternoon, Inez returned again, this time with her hands on her hips. "You will not believe what Mrs. Pembroke saw." I raised an eyebrow. "What now?" she said. Sabine marched into the school parking lot 20 minutes late, ranting about how nobody notified her earlier. Then Declan showed up at the same time and tried to blame his boss for scheduling a sudden meeting. I shook my head. "They're melting down." "Melting," Inez snorted. "Honey, they're evaporating." The next day brought more fallout. Another nanny, this one a college student, quit after 3 hours. Callum had thrown a tantrum so severe the neighbor called to check if they needed help. Declan's credit card declined when trying to pay for last-minute childcare. And all of it traveled through the neighborhood at lightning speed. Mrs. Pembroke cornered Inez outside the post office. "Those poor children," she'd said. According to Inez, running around without structure. They should never have let that nice mother leave. "She kept that household together," I groaned. "Please tell me she didn't say that part loud enough for the street to hear." "Oh, she did," Inez replied. "Twice." By the end of the week, the neighborhood gossip had fully blossomed into what could only be described as a public unraveling. Sabine berated a delivery driver for being late. Declan was seen shouting on his phone in the driveway. Nova tearfully told a teacher, "Grandma used to do our dinners. Now Daddy burns the food." Each piece reached me like a small knock on my door, not because I wanted to hear it, but because the world has a way of reporting what pride tries to hide. One evening, as Inez and I sat with cups of chamomile tea on my new porch, she sighed heavily. They are spending money they don't have on childcare they can't manage. And now Sabine is blaming Declan for driving you away. I stared into my tea. And Declan, he's blaming her, Inez said. He told someone at the grocery store that she pushed too hard, that she should have handled things more delicately. I let the steam rise between us. They pushed together. Yes, she agreed. But now that they're dealing with the fallout, they're pushing each other. A long silence settled, but it wasn't heavy. It was the kind of silence that comes when truth finally rises without resistance. I gathered my shawl around my shoulders. They created the chaos. I said softly, "Let them drown in it." Inez nodded, her expression firm. "And you stay right here, where you belong." The night deepened. The harbor fog rolling in with the quiet hum of the town. I watched the streetlights flicker through the mist. They had always depended on me to cushion the consequences of their choices. This time, the consequences were theirs alone. And I wondered, not with fear, but with clarity, how far they would spiral before they turned their anger back toward me. The certified letter arrived on a Tuesday morning, tucked between a grocery flyer and a utilities notice. I recognized Declan's handwriting on the front before I even tore it open. Sharp, rushed, angry. I stood at my small kitchen counter, the sunlight drifting across the floor, and unfolded the letter with steady hands. "Mother, your sudden disappearance has created a severe disruption to our household. You have abandoned your family obligations without notice. If you do not return to discuss this matter immediately, we will be forced to take necessary steps." Declan, necessary steps. The phrase sat on the page like a threat dressed in formal clothing. I read it twice, not for clarity, but for the absurdity of the idea that my absence was an offense punishable by his authority. A minute later, my phone buzzed with a voicemail notification. I pressed play. Declan's voice came through sharp and clipped. "Mom, I sent a formal letter. I expect you to take it seriously. You cannot just walk away from responsibilities. Call me when you get this." No apology, no concern, just demand after demand. I set the phone down. Out of the entire letter, one line stayed lodged under my ribs: "Abandoned your family obligations." As if I were a deserting soldier. As if motherhood came with a lifetime contract he got to enforce. I made tea, letting the kettle whistle without rushing to silence it. The noise filled the small cottage. Steady and clear, I poured the steaming water and sat at the table, letting the letter rest beside my cup. Another knock startled me. Inez's voice called through the door. "If that's what I think it is, open up." I brought scones. I let her in. She brushed past me, set down the box, and picked up the letter without waiting for permission. She read it once. Her eyebrows shot up. "He really sent this with his name on it, certified mail." I said, "Good grief." She dropped the paper like it offended her fingertips. "Listen to this nonsense. Abandoning family obligations. That boy wouldn't know an obligation if it bit him." I sat down across from her. "He thinks he's in the right. He thinks he's in control," she corrected, tapping the letter. "But this is panic disguised as authority." I nodded. "He's unraveling." Inez studied my face. "And you? Are you rattled?" I lifted my tea. "Not anymore." She smiled, slow and approving. "Good, because this kind of letter isn't a rope, it's a last straw. He's reaching blind." I folded the letter neatly and slid it into a drawer. "I'm not answering him." "Damn right you're not," she said. But you should show this to someone who can handle it better than either of us. I looked at her over the rim of my cup. I know exactly who. She grinned. Then call them. The cottage felt steady around me, grounded in a way that had nothing to do with walls or paint colors. Declan had spent years believing his voice carried enough weight to shape my choices, but he sent the letter to the wrong version of me. And now, instead of letting my son's threats tighten around my life, I reached for my phone not to call him, but to call someone who understood how to dismantle a threat properly. Harper Lane's office sat above a bakery that smelled of warm cinnamon, but the moment I stepped inside her space, the air shifted. No sweetness, just quiet resolve and a wall of neatly organized files. She looked up from her desk and gave me a small nod, the kind that said she had already guessed why I was here. Marlo, she greeted, standing. You brought the letter. I handed her the certified envelope and the printed schedule, along with my lease. She didn't sit until she had scanned them all, then her eyebrows lowered. He sent this to his own mother, she asked. I swallowed. Yes, and he put the words, abandoning family obligations, in writing. He did. Harper tapped the paper lightly against her palm. Well, he made my job easier. I sat across from her, feeling a strange mix of shame and relief. I need this to stop. Harper, I need him to stop treating me like he has legal authority over my life. You are a tenant, she said firmly. Not property. Her certainty hit me harder than I expected. I exhaled, shaky. He said he would take necessary steps. That was a bluff. She opened my lease again. He cannot raise your rent without 90 days written notice. He cannot exceed a 10% increase. He cannot evict you without cause. And he certainly cannot threaten you into unpaid labor. She leaned back in her chair. He thinks you don't know your rights. I looked down at my hands. For a long time, I didn't. Harper pulled a new sheet of letterhead from her drawer. Let's change that. She dictated aloud as she typed, her voice sharp and meticulous. Declan Grant. This letter serves as formal notice that any attempt to coerce, threaten, or intimidate Marlo Grant regarding housing or unpaid labor is unlawful. All future communication will be directed to my office. Any further harassment will be documented and addressed accordingly. She paused, then added one more line. Your recent actions toward your mother constitute a misuse of your rental authority and may be subject to legal review. I blinked. Legal review. It will scare him, she said plainly. People like Declan do not fear consequences until they can see their reflection in them. I hesitated. Is this too harsh? No, she said without looking up. This is proportionate. She printed the letter, signed it with a decisive flourish, and slid it toward me. I will mail a copy and email a copy. He will receive both today. I stared at the signature at the bottom of the page, Harper Lane, attorney at law, and felt something heavy in me loosen, breath by breath. Marlo, she said gently, you do not need to feel guilty for protecting yourself. I looked at her, throat tight. But he's my son, and you're his mother, she replied. A mother is not a servant. A mother is not leverage. He crossed a line, and you stepped back from it. That is not guilt. That is survival. A small, broken sound escaped me. Harper handed me a tissue without breaking her composure. I spent decades doing everything for him. I whispered. I thought if I gave enough, he'd treat me with respect. I never expected this. Harper folded her hands. People who rely on your obedience forget your strength until you stop giving it to them. I sat straighter. She continued, and when they can no longer use pressure, they panic. Declan will either back down completely or escalate once. After this letter, he will have no space to escalate again. A heavy quiet filled the office. Harper sealed the envelope. Go home. Rest. Let me handle him. As I stood to leave, she added softly, you are not alone in this anymore. Outside, the air smelled of cinnamon again, but this time it didn't sting. I walked to my car with a steadier heartbeat, clutching the thin copy of the letter like armor. Declan's threats had ruled my life for far too long. Now, his threats were someone else's problem. Harper called me 2 days after she sent the cease and desist letter. Her voice held that particular calm lawyers use when they're delivering news that should not be surprising, yet somehow still is. "Marlo," she said, "your son has contacted my office." I steadied my breath. What did he want? "He is requesting mediation." I sank into my kitchen chair. Mediation. After everything he said, Harper shuffled papers. His tone was strained, defensive at first, then less so. He insisted that there had been a miscommunication and said he believes a formal discussion will resolve matters. I pressed my fingertips into the wood grain of the table. "He's afraid the letter made him look bad." "Yes," Harper said plainly. "And Sabine was on the call with him. She spoke over him twice, insisting they fix appearances before things escalate." I swallowed. "Of course she did," Harper continued. "I agreed to schedule mediation. I will attend beside you. And I will speak first. You will not be cornered." "Thank you," I whispered. Truly. After we hung up, I sat quietly for a long time. My new cottage was peaceful, but my mind churned with memories of Declan's voice, the sharpness in it, the entitlement, the certainty that I would bend. Now he wanted mediation, not reconciliation. Mediation, a place where both sides present evidence. I made tea and tried to breathe through the heaviness in my chest. A knock rattled the door. Inez barged in before I could say come in, carrying a grocery bag and a look that already knew everything. "Your lawyer called you, didn't she?" I blinked. "How do you always know Arthur saw your son pacing in his driveway this morning?" she said, setting the bag on the counter, hands in his hair, muttering to himself. That man only paces when life knocks him sideways. So I put 2 and 2 together. I exhaled slowly. He wants mediation. Oh, I heard. She took out a loaf of bread and a jar of soup as if preparing for a storm. Which means he finally realized he cannot bully you anymore. I rubbed my palms together, heat simmering beneath my ribs. I don't know what he expects from this. He expects you to fold, she said. They always expect that from women who've spent their lives keeping the peace. Inez moved around the kitchen with brisk efficiency, pouring soup into a pot and turning on the stove. She needed motion when emotion threatened to spill over. He wants to look reasonable, she continued. Sabine wants to fix their reputation. And both of them want to pretend this was a misunderstanding instead of coercion. I looked down at my hands. I just don't want to fall apart in front of him. She paused, softened. Oh, Marlo, you have already survived the worst part. The rest is just speaking aloud what he forced you to swallow. The pot began to simmer, filling the kitchen with warmth. Inez ladled soup into 2 bowls and sat across from me. When is the mediation, she asked. Next Tuesday morning. She nodded. Then eat. Rest. Wear something that makes you feel like yourself. And remember, Harper will do the heavy lifting. You just tell the truth. I stirred my spoon slowly. He's my son. He is, she agreed. But that doesn't mean he gets to be your warden. A silence settled between us. Not bitter, not scared, just full of the reality neither of us needed to speak aloud. After lunch, I walked her to the door. The fog had begun its slow creep across the neighborhood, sinking over the edges of the cottages like a whisper. Inez paused on the porch. There's a storm coming, you know. In the weather, I asked. In the grants, she corrected. And storms have a way of uncovering whatever people try hardest to hide. I lowered my eyes. Are you saying I should prepare myself? She squeezed my hand. I'm saying your son is about to show you who he really is when he can no longer win. When she left, I closed the door gently and leaned against it, letting the quiet wrap around me. Declan wanted mediation. Sabine wanted control. Their household was unraveling faster than they could patch it. And now we were heading into a room where no one could hide behind polite smiles or printed schedules. I picked up Harper's business card from the counter and held it tight between my fingers. Soon, the truth would have to be spoken out loud, with all three of us sitting at the same table, and nothing would ever be the same after that. The Portland Business Center smelled faintly of coffee and old carpet, the kind of place where people came to argue in professional voices. Harper walked beside me down the hallway, her heels quiet, her presence loud enough to hold me up. "You will sit to my left," she said. "If at any point you need a break, say so. You are not on trial. It feels like it," I murmured. She glanced at me. They crossed a line. "Today, we name it." The conference room door was already open. Inside, Declan sat at one end of the long table, jaw tight, fingers pressed together so hard his knuckles were white. Sabine sat beside him, spine straight, chin lifted. Across from them, a gray-haired man with kind eyes and a file folder in front of him looked up as we entered. "Mrs. Grant?" he asked. "I am Donald Hughes. I will be your mediator this morning." I shook his hand. "Thank you." At the far corner of the table sat a woman in a navy suit, mid-50s, composed and observant. She rose and offered her hand next. "Patricia Winters," she said, "counsel for Declan and Sabine." Harper's posture shifted almost imperceptibly. "Harper Lane, representing Marlowe." I took my seat beside Harper. Declan looked at me, just briefly, then away. Sabine refused to look at me at all. Donald cleared his throat. "We are here to discuss a dispute that has arisen regarding housing, expectations, and family relationships. This is a confidential process. No interruptions. Each party will have an opportunity to speak." He nodded at Declan. "You requested this session. You may begin." Declan inhaled, squared his shoulders. "Thank you. This whole thing has been blown out of proportion. My mother left suddenly, without notice. And now there is legal language being used that makes us sound like abusers. That is not what happened." He glanced at Patricia, who gave him a small nod. "We had a conversation." He went on, about rent, about contributing, about helping with the children. It was a misunderstanding, not coercion. Harper's pen tapped once against her notebook, then stilled. Donald turned to me. "Mrs. Grant, do you agree this was a misunderstanding?" I met his eyes. "No, I do not." He nodded once. "You will have your turn. Let him finish." Declan continued, agitation creeping into his voice. "We set rent below market value for years. We thought it was reasonable to ask for help in return." She left without a word, and then got a lawyer involved as if we were criminals. Sabine finally spoke. Her tone clipped. "We have been juggling full-time jobs and 2 young children. We are drowning. We asked her to be part of a solution. Instead, she made us look like monsters." I felt Harper shift beside me, ready, but she waited. Donald looked over at us. "Ms. Lane." Harper folded her hands. "My client has documentation of the conversation and subsequent threats. I would like to enter these into the record." She slid a neatly organized stack of pages across the table. My lease, the printed nanny schedule, Declan's certified letter. Patricia reached for them, scanning quickly. Her lips thinned. Harper spoke evenly. Declan and Sabine presented an ultimatum: unpaid childcare every weekday and 2 weekends a month, or a rent increase to undefined market rate. They framed it as family duty, but tied it directly to housing, which they control. Then Mr. Grant sent a certified letter accusing his mother of abandoning obligations and threatening necessary steps if she did not return. That is not a misunderstanding. That is pressure. Declan's jaw worked. "You are twisting it." Harper turned to me. "Marlowe, Tell Mr. Hughes how that conversation felt to you." I swallowed. They did not ask, they told me. They listed the times, the days, the duties. When I hesitated, they said my rent would be raised if I refused. They knew I could not afford a sudden increase. They knew I had nowhere else to go. They used that. Declan leaned forward. "We gave you a home. You owned a house," I said quietly. "I rented a basement. I paid you every month. I cleaned, I fixed, I kept to myself. And when you wanted more from me, you put a price on my compliance." Sabine snapped. "You are twisting it now. We spent weeks planning how to present it in a way that—" She stopped, mouth snapping shut, but it was too late. Donald's pen paused. "You spent weeks planning." She flushed. "I meant talking about it, figuring out the best way to bring it up." Harper's gaze sharpened. So the ultimatum was not impulsive. It was premeditated. Patricia cleared her throat. "My clients were discussing a family arrangement. That is all. The language in the letter may have been poorly chosen." But Donald held up a hand. "I have heard enough about the letter for now. What concerns me is the connection between rent and unpaid labor." He turned to Declan and Sabine. "You control your mother's housing. You proposed extensive childcare duties as a condition for keeping that housing affordable. When she declined, you threatened to raise her rent and suggested necessary steps if she did not comply. That, legally or not, meets most definitions of coercive behavior." The word hung in the room like a bell. Coercive. Declan's face drained of color. "We were just trying to survive. Everyone in our generation is struggling. She knows that." Harper's voice cut through his protest. "Struggling does not entitle you to enslave your mother, Mr. Grant." Patricia lifted a hand. "Enslave is a strong word. So is abandoning obligations," Harper replied. "Yet your client used it willingly." Silence settled. Brittle and dense. Donald looked at me. "What do you want from this process, Mrs. Grant?" I took a breath. "I want my boundaries respected. I want no more threats tied to housing or money. I want all communication to come through Harper until I decide otherwise. And I want it acknowledged in this room that what they did was wrong." Declan's mouth opened, then closed. Sabine finally looked at me. Really looked at me. There was no softness in her eyes. Only a mix of anger and something that looked very close to fear. Donald turned to Patricia. "Can you advise your clients on whether they are willing to agree to those terms?" Patricia hesitated. For the first time since I walked in, she looked unsure. Her gaze flicked from the letter to the schedule to Declan's rigid posture. "I believe," she said slowly, "that my clients would be wise to accept a clear boundary agreement." Declan stared at her. "You are siding with her." "I am siding with reality," she replied quietly. "There is no defensible way to justify using rent as leverage for unpaid childcare. Not here, not on paper, not in any room like this." Her words landed harder than any argument I could have made. In that moment, I watched something subtle but profound shift, the first crack splintering through the structure of their certainty. For the first time since this nightmare began, even their own lawyer could not shield them from what they had done. Patricia folded her hands on the table, her tone shifting into something resigned but professional. "Given the circumstances, I recommend we outline a memorandum of understanding. Clear expectations, clear boundaries, no room for further conflict." Harper nodded once. "I already have a draft prepared." She slid a document from her briefcase. The paper made a soft sound against the polished table, quiet. Final, unmistakably serious. Declan flinched as if the page itself accused him. Donald adjusted his glasses. "Let's review the terms." Harper spoke first. "Measured and unwavering. Number 1, there will be no financial threats directed toward Marlowe Grant. This includes rent manipulation, sudden increases, or implied consequences tied to her living situation. Declan's jaw tightened. We weren't threatening. Patricia placed a firm hand on his arm. Do not interrupt, Harper continued. Number 2, there shall be no child care pressure of any kind. No scheduling requests framed as obligations. No expectations of unpaid labor. No emotional manipulation disguised as family duty. Sabine's lips parted, ready to object. But she shut them when Donald raised a hand. Number 3, Harper went on. Your clients will not interfere with Marlowe Grant's housing, records, or address. They will not search for her residence, show up unannounced, or attempt to monitor her location. Declan blinked. We just want to know where she lives. She disappeared. I exhaled. Because you left me no choice. He looked away. Harper resumed. Number 4. All communication from Declan or Sabine must go through my office. Phone, text, letter, or in-person contact is prohibited unless expressly invited. Patricia nodded slowly. These conditions are reasonable. Sabine's voice cracked with indignation. Reasonable? She is cutting us out of her life. Harper tilted her head. Your behavior forced her to. Donald clasped his hands. Let's finish the document. He passed the pages around the table. Declan skimmed them, his breathing heavier than before. The room felt painfully small. This makes it sound like we're dangerous, he muttered. Harper's tone left no room for argument. Your actions endangered her well-being. The memorandum reflects reality. Sabine leaned toward him, whispering something sharp under her breath. Declan closed his eyes, shoulders slumping. I never wanted it like this, he said to no one in particular. I answered softly. But this is what happened. Donald handed me a pen. Mrs. Grant, would you like to sign first? My fingers curled around the pen. The weight of it sank into my palm, steady, solid. I signed my name in a slow, deliberate script. Harper signed next. Crisp and sure. Patricia nudged the document toward her clients. Your turn. Sabine snatched the pen, signing hard enough that the paper wrinkled beneath her hand. When she finished, she pushed it toward Declan, almost shoving it. He stared at the signature line for several long seconds. Then he sighed and finally signed. His name looked smaller than I remembered. Donald gathered the papers, tapping them into a neat stack. This memorandum is now part of the mediation record. All parties are expected to follow it. Failure to do so may result in escalation through the appropriate legal channels. Sabine let out a bitter huff. Unbelievable. Harper ignored her. She stood, offering me her arm. We're done here. Marlowe. I rose, my legs steady beneath me. Declan finally looked at me. Really looked. His eyes were a confusion of hurt, frustration, and something he couldn't shape into words. Mom, can we just talk without all this? I shook my head gently. Not until you understand why all this was needed. He looked down, hands curled in his lap. Patricia closed her briefcase. We'll be in touch. Mr. Grant? Carefully. As Harper guided me out of the room, the silence behind us felt heavier than the conflict itself. For the first time in my life, I walked away from my son with boundaries strong enough to hold. After the ink dried, they no longer owned a single piece of me. The cost of that truth that would be theirs to pay next. I found out about the first rejection from Arthur. He stopped by my cottage with a small bag of oranges and a look on his face that said he was carrying more than fruit. Your son applied for a place over on Ashmont Street, he said. Got turned down. I set the oranges on the counter. Why Arthur hesitated. Because the management company pulled up the mediation record. Some of those documents became public when Patricia filed her follow-up notice. My breath paused. Which documents? The "The letter he sent you," he said gently. "The written schedule, the part where he tied your housing to unpaid labor." I leaned into the counter. "So they saw the coercion?" Arthur nodded. "Exactly that. And landlords do not like tenants with a history of threatening others over leases." By the next day, Inez brought news of a second rejection and then a third. Declan had tried applying for rental properties closer to his office, hoping to shorten his commute. Every application hit the same wall. Inez clicked her tongue. He called someone in the neighborhood screaming that the real estate market is rigged against responsible fathers. He conveniently left out the part where he nearly extorted his own mother. I didn't answer. The air around me felt painfully still. 2 days later, the fallout reached Sabine. I received a message from the preschool director. She was an old acquaintance. She wrote simply, "Declan and Sabine no longer have backup care. Chaos. Hope you are safe." And then I heard from Mrs. Pembroke herself, who seemed to materialize outside the post office like she had been waiting specifically for me. "Marlowe," she whispered, pulling me aside. "Their sitter quit again. Said she's done being snapped at every time Sabine gets overwhelmed." I swallowed. The children must be confused. "Oh, they are," she said. "Nova told another parent. Grandma left because Daddy yelled too much. That spread very quickly. That sentence should have hurt. Instead, something in me settled deeper into place. The consequences had landed exactly where they belonged, on the shoulders that created them. By the end of the week, the cracks in Declan and Sabine's marriage began to shine through their arguments loud, public, and impossible to ignore. Inez sat with me on my porch one evening as the sun went down. "They had a fight in the driveway," she said. "Sabine accused him of ruining their reputation. He accused her of pushing you too hard. Neither of them thinks they're to blame." "They both were," I said quietly. "Of course they were," she replied. "But admitting guilt requires humility. They lost that a long time ago." A long, quiet beat passed between us. I thought about all the times I had smoothed Declan's troubles, backed his excuses, carried burdens he never noticed were in my hands. I had been a cushion against the world, and he had assumed I always would be. Now the world was hitting him directly for the first time, and the impact was unmistakable. 3 more nannies quit. Nova refused to get in the car one morning because Declan yelled too loudly the night before. Sabine posted a cryptic message online about betrayal within family, which backfired when neighbors left comments praising my strength instead. I learned all of it secondhand. I didn't need to be there. I didn't need to witness any of it. Their chaos no longer belonged to me. On Friday, I took a quiet walk along the harbor. The breeze carried the scent of salt, and the gulls called overhead like they had been waiting for me to finally hear them. Inez walked beside me, hands tucked in her jacket pockets. "You look lighter," she said. "I feel lighter." "Good." She bumped her shoulder against mine. "You earned that." We stopped near the railing overlooking the water. The waves rolled in. Steady and unhurried, I rested my hands on the cool metal bar. "For the first time in years, I don't feel responsible for fixing anything," Inez smiled. "Because you finally walked free." I nodded. No guilt, no hesitation, no fear of the next demand, just freedom, sharp, gentle, and real. The town hall smelled faintly of damp coats and strong coffee, the scent of a community gathering for reasons no one wanted to articulate out loud. I stood near the back, hands folded loosely in front of me. Harper was at my side, not as a shield this time, but as a witness. I was steady enough on my own. Declan was already at the front of the room, pacing beside the podium like a man preparing for battle with shadows. His hair was unkempt, eyes red at the edges. Sabine sat 2 chairs behind him, staring at her phone, unwilling or unable to meet anyone's gaze. The moderator cleared his throat. Next item, recent concerns brought forward by Mr. Grant regarding community misinformation. Declan stepped forward, gripping the edge of the podium so tightly I worried it would splinter. "Thank you," he said. "I'm here because my family has been the target of unfair rumors, lies. People have been talking about us, spreading information they do not understand." A murmur moved through the room, soft, unimpressed. He pushed on. "My mother's mediation record was taken out of context. People are acting like I abused her. That's not what happened." Across the room, Mrs. Pembroke sniffed loudly. Someone near her whispered, "It's all documented." He signed the memorandum himself. Declan's shoulders twitched. He lifted the papers he brought printouts. Maybe emails. Maybe an attempt to rewrite what already stood in ink. The situation was exaggerated. We asked her for help. Families help each other. But now everyone is treating us like villains. His voice cracked at the end, the veneer slipping. Near. Sabine shifted in her seat, but did not stand with him. Her distance sharper than any spoken words. A man from the back raised his hand. "Did you threaten her housing? Yes or no?" Declan blinked rapidly. It was a misunderstanding. "That's not an answer." Another woman cut in. "You tied her rent to unpaid childcare? That's coercion." He slammed his palm on the podium. "It was not coercion. It was family pressure. That's different." The room exhaled in disbelief, one unified breath. The moderator spoke carefully. "Mr. Grant, the mediation documents state clearly that the request was tied to rent, and that legal counsel found it inappropriate. This is not rumor. It is written record." Declan froze. His gaze drifted over the room, searching for an ally. He found none, not even Sabine. She avoided his eyes entirely, her jaw clenched. Then his eyes found me. I didn't move. His voice fell to a hoarse whisper. "Mom, say something, please." Harper touched my arm, not to guide me, but to remind me I had the choice. For the first time in decades, the choice was entirely mine. I stepped forward slowly, the room opening around me like a path being cleared. Declan's breath hitched. "Mom, this is ruining my life." My voice came out quiet, but it cut through the room sharper than any shout. "I didn't ruin your life, Declan," I said. "I just stopped protecting you from the consequences of who you chose to be." The silence that followed wasn't cold. It wasn't cruel. It was the silence of truth, settling exactly where it belonged. Declan's face crumpled, the realization finally breaking through his denial. Sabine looked away, her cheeks flushed with something that resembled shame. I turned from the podium. Harper stepped aside, letting me walk first. No applause, no commotion, just the sound of my shoes crossing the worn wooden floor and the faint whistle of winter air waiting outside. When I stepped out into the cold Portland evening, the wind hit my cheeks like a baptism sharp. Clean, honest. The streetlights glowed against the harbor fog, and for the first time in years, the world felt wide enough for me to breathe. I wrapped my scarf tighter and walked toward the cottage that was mine, the life that was mine, the future that for the first time since I was a young woman belonged only to me. And if you've ever had to choose yourself to survive, hit like, leave a comment, or subscribe. There is more to come, and no one should walk their road to freedom alone.